Good evening and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this very special live stream. I'm very excited to be able to host this live stream this evening. This is a live stream, as you can see, on the Kaleidoscope Adventures page today. So I'm coming to you from a different Facebook page, and I'm being joined by two amazing podcasters. Genuinely heroes of mine, and I can say that without them, they know that that's true because I was talking to them and reaching out to them about their podcasts way before I had to be nice to them just because I'm another host. So to tell you a little bit about what's happening today, our three podcasts, the Global Bandroom, After Sectionals, and Everything Band, are all sponsored and supported by Kaleidoscope Adventures. And we are 1 week out from Midwest Band Clinic, or Midwest Clinic, as we stand. Some of you may be attending. I know this time of year, we're normally all preparing our travel plans to be heading there, and I'm sure we're all going to miss it very much this year.
Yep.
And it's a great time for the industry to all meet each other and so on. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that later on. But that's why we're here today, just to, I suppose, thank our sponsors, Kaleidoscope Adventures, and to talk a little bit to each other too about how 2020 has been and what our plans are for 2021. So I'll hand it over to maybe Darcy first. Darcy, okay. For anyone that doesn't know you, tell us a little bit about you and your podcast.
All right. I'm Darcy Vogt Williams, and I teach in Leander, Texas. I host the podcast After Sectionals that I've been hosting for the last, I guess, maybe like 5 years now with my two coworkers, Jenna Yee and TJ West. And we sit around on a Friday afternoon and talk about how our week went. We make sure that we are very candid about the things that are awesome happening in our band hall and the things that are not awesome in our band hall, because nobody wants to only hear the good stuff. We actually should have been performing at Midwest this year. So this is really bittersweet to know that, Midwest is happening in a completely different capacity, and that we're not just missing out to go see the vendors and see the great concerts, but we're missing out on giving one as well. So it's been a very bittersweet December.
Yeah, it's been a very bittersweet 2020 altogether, really. But yeah, and I know we're going to get into talking a little bit about sort of what's working this year, what isn't, because I know just for anyone that, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that are watching this that know both of your podcasts. You've been very resourceful, and your podcast has been very insightful in how we can maybe get through these times, Mark, you were one of the very first band podcasts I started listening to. It's called Everything Band, so it is, it does what it says in the tin. But your podcast in particular is really fantastic interviews, and you have great guests on, and you have a great way of getting some really great information from your guests as well. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your podcast.
So I'm Mark Connor. I host the Everything Band podcast. It's been running since the spring, I guess, of 2017, and it was inspired by a couple of shows I listened to, and I will say that I had listened to Darcy's show before I started my podcast, so I knew I wasn't the first band podcast out there. But basically, it started, like in my basement, and I thought I'll try to interview a couple people, put it on the air, and now we're 182 episodes in, and it seems like it just keeps going and going and growing. But it's basically just interviews with people in the field, teachers, composers, industry people, performers in some cases. As far as me, I teach band in St. Louis at the Sal Merowitz Jewish Community School. I also am a composer published by Robert W. Smith's company, RWS Music. And that's who I am.
And I have to say, and I said it to you off air as well, and I always say it to you, your podcast is so consistent as well, and it's always there. And you really do get great stories. You go back to a lot of these people's sort of origin stories. I always hear you mention origin story, and you talk about sort of that journey that they've been on. And some of the interviews have been incredibly deep, and some of the people that you've spoken to have really, really opened up to you. So, I really admire your interviewing skills. I talk too much. I talk way too much for this. Well, just to let people know a little bit about myself, because you guys are so well established in this that if there's one person people don't know on this live stream, it's probably myself. My name is Keith Kelly. As you can tell, I am not from the USA. I'm from Ireland, from the west coast of Ireland here, just outside of Galway. And I am a band director with a youth band in a place called Ballinasloe. And I also work in music travel as well. So if you've ever had a band over for St. Patrick's Day in Ireland, you might have worked with me at some stage. And with travel all falling apart just on the verge of St. Patrick's Day this year, I decided to take it upon myself to interview a few people on a platform I had called Bands of Ireland. And Darcy was one of them, and Mark was one of them as well. And I didn't have a fancy microphone like this at the time. And we were just talking about missing a band during St. Patrick's Day. And, you know, the idea, you know, I think at the time we were like, man, this is going to be a tough 2 weeks. But you know what? We'll take this time to reflect and review. And when we come back in April, we'll be all the better for it. And out of that was born sort of these interviews that I do, which is sort of a slightly more international flavor to the band world, and I've done some documentary podcasts then as well for drum corps, and I'm working on one now called Bandemic, which is kind of a reflection on this year. But what I wanted to talk about tonight, where I wanted to start with tonight, was that we're all three beginning band directors, and that doesn't happen very often on these sort of podcasts. So I thought it would be a great way to talk about what we all have in common here. 2020 has been so difficult for beginning band. I mean, it's difficult for bands everywhere, but beginning band in particular. Mark, let's start with you on your sort of journey, because we actually shared one of these many things that we kind of throw against the wall to see what works and what doesn't work. And we actually trialed a project for your band and my band. Yep. So tell me a little bit about 2020 and how you've been approaching it and what's happening in your school.
Well, the spring was a bit of a disaster. You know, as we all know, we were all just kind of like trying to figure everything out as we went along, and it was fine. But you know, the students weren't practicing, and we know how all that went. But over the summer, I start fourth grade beginners, and it's mandatory for all the students to take band in fourth grade. Then it's an elective in fifth grade, and then the middle school has its own band that's elective also. And so it was decided this year in the summer by the administration that we weren't going to do fourth grade beginners. We were going to take a pause on fourth grade beginners, and next year I'll just have two cohorts of beginners, a fourth grade group and a fifth grade group. It's okay. It's not, as we know it's not going to make a huge difference in the long run. But so this year I'm not doing beginners at all. So I'm going to have to like try to remember, you know, all those things again. No, I won't forget them. But so no beginners. So what I did with them is I still wanted to make sure that I taught them. So I started out with bucket drumming, and we did that for about the first 6-7 weeks. And I was able to kind of teach them rhythm, and we read rhythm charts and, you know, did some basic, you know, stuff with the buckets. And then since it got cooler and the weather got cold, we have been doing Soundtrap and loops, and so things like Incredibox and Soundtrap, and teaching them digital technology. And so, you know, right now they just took they're going to take a Hanukkah song and put some beats to it, and you know, we're doing that. And it's been the same. I did teach band for my fifth graders and my middle schoolers. We did have band in person, but the plug got pulled on that as the numbers in St. Louis rise. I mean, it's pretty bad right now here. So that's what we're doing. It's we're just making do, and we'll pick it all back up again when it's over. And you know, we actually, so our project that we had was, and we ran it for a couple of weeks, but it was this idea. I forget the name of the program actually now. What was the name? It was on Flipgrid.
Flipgrid, yeah, that's right.
Flipgrid.
Yeah,
yep.
And actually, what I loved about that, and I ended up taking through the rest of my year with my beginners, was the idea of just pre-recorded videos. You know, I'd been trying this whole live video thing with Zoom, and my kids in particular are very young. We don't do the grade system like you do, but my kids would generally between the ages of 8 and 10, and so trying to do any live experience has been, you know, we avoid it where possible, particularly with instruments in their hands. So pre-record videos have been great, and they've been recording videos, send them through to us, and we've been sending feedback, and we send them videos as well. So I do have to thank you for introducing me to Flipgrid, because it actually gave me the idea of what I would do with my band this year.
I think it works well with the younger kids for sure, because unlike smart music, it doesn't give you any feedback. It doesn't like assess them. And, for the young kids, they don't really, they're not always getting the best scores on smart music. And the older kids don't get the best scores on smart music. So Flipgrid is a way for the younger ones to just give you that, for you to assess them and give them some feedback in a kind of a safe way, I guess, or a non-judgmental way.
Yeah. Definitely, and it's fun. It's presented well. It looks colorful and so on. Darcy, you say did you use Flip? Let me tell
we use it
me
multiple
a bit
times
about your story. Yeah.
So we are full on going. My district is offering our parents a choice whether or not they send their kids to school or not. And if you don't go to school, then you still have to attend virtually. In addition to that, my school also decided that to alleviate some stress, they were going to put us on block scheduling. So we're on an A day, B day setup, which is great for beginners, sarcasm included. But truthfully, I don't feel like we're doing a whole lot different. Like let's take like my flute class, for example. I have 6 kids that come to school for flute class, and then I have 20 at home. And so I'm teaching those 6 kids in person while I am teaching those 20 kids virtually. And, I think there were a lot of people really freaking out about the idea of trying to, pay attention to all of the kids at the same time. But I think that of any group of teachers that was prepared for this, pre-prepared is not a word, prepared for this without knowing it, it has to be your band people, because we've been splitting our attention over a billion different places every day for our entire career. Like, I might be listening to what the trombones are doing, but I'm definitely watching what my flutes are doing during a regular band class. So this idea of like having 6 kids in person while I'm trying to teach these kids on Zoom really doesn't feel a whole lot different to me. I mean, it's awkward for sure. And the fact that I can't hear the kids is not ideal. But we have really kept the flavor of our band hall and our band culture throughout all of this. We are definitely moving slower. We're nowhere near where we are on a typical year, but, very early on, the 3 of us sat down and were very honest with ourselves about what our expectation needed to be. And we knew that if we set our expectations for being at those same checkpoints that we normally are, then we would only be disappointed this year, and the year would feel stressful, and the kids would feel stressed because, everything that we're feeling gets pushed onto the children too. And that our goal was to get the kids as far as we could and make them have fun while they're doing it. Because if I can retain them, then I can reteach them later. Right. And so, we've really tried to keep the same feeling. I mean, like everything I've ever talked about how quickly I pace class, I pretty much have kept that. I know a lot of teachers have really felt stressed out about having the online component and the delay and everything, but like the kids don't feel the delay unless there's back and forth talking. Like they still feel my pacing. So, I mean, to be honest, like the kids are on mute, so I don't feel the delay and they don't feel the delay because we're just moving through. We've kept the pacing.
I have to ask a very important question on that pacing, though, because we're talking to a Texas band director here. Do you have a Met on during the Zoom classes? You better believe I have a Met on. I have it piped through my speakers in the band hall, and every day I make sure that they can hear their Met. But there was a lot of prep going into this, like in those first few weeks, and it was actually pretty great the way our district did this. The entire school district was online for the first 3 weeks. And so we were able to prep the online learning in those first 3 weeks. Like the kids learned that I'm going to tell you what your metronome is set on, and everybody is going to set their metronome right now, because when I call you, you need to be ready to turn on your metronome for me. And so, we've gone through and we've prepped the kids on look in the chat for what order of children I'm going to call on. Ahead of time who I'm going to call on. Ahead of time that you're going to be right after Mary. So when Mary goes, Pete, you're up. They already have their Met set. So there was a lot of legwork in the early stages for setting up these kids to be able to keep our pace. And it's let us basically have normal band, just not moving as quickly. How have the two of you found kids dealing with technology. You know, sometimes technology is used as an excuse for not being able to sort of keep up with things. But, you know, kids are usually a lot quicker with this sort of stuff than certainly than work colleagues sometimes. How have the two of you found that? Mark, how have you been finding that?
We're not doing band online, although I kind of wish that we were, because I think I could still be doing band as opposed to being in person. But from my perspective, I'm only doing the technology in the course. I have a couple kids who are remote learning, and they're piped in. We have an iPad that's up on a stand, and it's like you're talking to the screen, and then you're talking to the other people, and it just seems fine. They seem to negotiate it pretty well, and they seem to be able to get my attention when they need it. So no problems with that so far. But then again, I'm not teaching instruments like Darcy is.
Right.
The teaching, you know what, that was the idea of teaching beginners was so scary at the beginning of the year. Like going through, I mean, like, Keith is a clarinet player. So Keith, you know this clarinet stuff. Like, let's talk about putting the reed on. Let's teach the kids to put the reed on when I'm not in the room with them, and how to check to make sure everything is set up and everything. Man, like, I have never made so many videos in my entire life. I have such a wide variety of musical videos in my library now that I can send out. And actually, like, there's so much that has come from this technologically that I will keep forever.
Yes.
Like, for example, let's talk about this read thing. Like, I can remember sitting down and making this 30-minute read video. And I did it exactly like I would do it in class. Like, I talked to the camera, with the same pace and with the same, like, okay, let's show me that you can push up your ligature. Let's put the reed down. Okay, take the reed back off, take the ligature off, put the ligature back on, put the reed on. No, okay, let's pull it down. Let's pull the ligature down. And I did it step by step, just like how I would in class. And it ended up being an epically long video. But I had the kids watch it. And when they came back to class, they knew how to put a reed on. And I was like, nice. How many years have I wasted a whole class period teaching them how to put on a reed when they could have done this at home and come back just as good? So there are some aspects of this that have been eye-opening to how we are not using technology. And I think that there are so many of us, and probably those of us that are, quote, in the older spectrum of this, because now I fall into that category too, but where we've almost had like a badge of honor that we don't use technology. Like, band is an old school class. Like, I need to see the things. I need to hear the things. I need to do this in person. And so we've really held on to like the old school way of teaching band. And we have discovered so many ways that really is going to revolutionize how I teach for the rest of my career, because we were forced to do it.
100%. Yeah. Sorry, Mark.
I was just going to say, it's very much a revolution in what we do. Now, we're still going to do what we do, but, just this whole thing I'm doing with Soundtrap and learning how to teach technology, that's something I'm going to fold into what I do going forward, because it's so useful and relevant to the kids. It's going to supplement what we do as in band and ensemble music.
I had one student in particular, let's call her Walter as a nod to Darcy's many Walters that she has. And she was struggling on her instrument, and I'm not sure that whether maybe I hope I'm not the only one that does this, and now I'm admitting to it. But I really didn't think that she was going to last, and I would do everything that I could. But you have a big group of kids in front of you, and you have a short amount of time. I seen her as someone that wasn't going to maybe last more than a year. She has flourished this year because I'm sending videos, and she is watching them and rewatching them and pausing them and practicing and then moving on. And it's like, if I have such a short amount of time with my band each week. So I see them twice a week in the evenings after school, on a Monday night and Thursday night. And it's all mixed instrumentation, so I have everything from piccolos to trombones in the one class, with the exception of drummers. I wouldn't do that to myself. But this player has been able to where she wasn't getting that attention from me, maybe she was getting a few, minute here or there. She's been able to actually just continually watch what I'm doing. And like for the sake that it's going to take me to take maybe 10 minutes after band practice every week just to summarize it on a video and send it out to her and whoever else, if it helps even that one kid each week, that's worth 10 minutes. That's one thing I will 100% be carrying into 2021 and beyond. Have you found some kids have just found this type of teaching more effective?
some kids like asynchronous. They like to take their time and watch it again and slow it down and absorb it. Some of them like it. I definitely am going to keep making Flipgrid videos from here on out and have that part of their practice. Go home, watch the video, do this, record a video for me. It's like I said earlier, just a good way to assess.
Absolutely. There's so much of this stuff. Like, I would very early on in their fall semester send, little videos for them to practice warm-up skills. But this year, those kids under our normal circumstances were getting to hear me play with them every single day. And they were getting to hear that characteristic sound every single day and have something to match. And especially now that we are on block schedule and virtual, they weren't getting the everyday part of it. So we've been making these warm-up videos for our kids that we send home that, like, as they're writing down at the end of class, what they need to do that night, the very first thing that they put is their daily warm-up video, where they're going through and they're like, maybe tonight I tell the trombones that you're not going to play the warm-up with me. You're going to burp the warm-up with me. And then I want you to go back and I want you to do the video again. And this time I want you to put it on the instrument and do it with me. Or tonight I want you to go and I want you to play the warm-up video in front of your parents. And I want your parents to hear if you're matching me. And I want y'all to talk about it. But there have been all sorts of really easy things that, like you talking about, you take 10 minutes at the end of your rehearsal. And if it helps one kid, exact same thing for us. Like all of these videos that we have put out do nothing but reinforce what we want them to hear at home. And we've just been trusting the kids to do it at home all this time. And so there's a part of us that almost wonders, will some of the kids shockingly be more prepared than they are in a typical year because of some of these resources that they have access to and that we're utilizing more this year than we have previously. Now, we may find out that this year is a crapshoot and that it's, whatever, but I'll be curious to see how it ends.
I had a question for you, Darcy. So teaching beginners online, what I would fear the most is, what do you do to fix the problems that are inside the mouth that you can't hear clearly?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of things. I'm going to talk about clarinet first because there's so much that has to happen on clarinet. So like, for example, when my kids do their Flipgrid videos, I make them do it at an angle, and I make them put their hair up so that I can watch what's happening right here on their throats. We do a lot of singing in class, like with my low brass class, on taws and toes, so that they're feeling that. We do a lot of air on our hands. We do a lot of that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be really honest. Tone quality is the number one thing that we're concerned about, because even when a kid sends me a video, if they have a crappy microphone, I don't know if I'm hearing bad tone or if I'm hearing a bad microphone sometimes. And we've been encouraging these kids to get USB microphones. Thank God we live in a time where you can find pretty affordable ones. But even my quote good kids, not all of them have jumped on board on that. And so I do have a lot of kids that I don't really know what I'm hearing. And trying to reinforce what should be going on in the mouth. Like, we're articulating with them every day, like making them tell me what they should be feeling. What should you be feeling on the inside of the mouth? Because I feel like if they can at least tell me, if they know how to describe it, then they're more likely to be able to figure it out also, even if I can't hear them very well. But I don't know. We're going to find some cool bad habits.
There's going to be some interesting sounds coming into the band hall. Yeah, absolutely. I one of the funniest things for me has been watching, because most of my kids are, as I said, they're quite young, and I'm not getting them to buy USB microphones, not quite yet. But so the parents are recording the most of them don't own phones. The parents are recording everything themselves, but getting some very interesting angles that the parents, some of them those parents will make videographers. Some of them absolutely won't. Some very interesting angles of nostrils that I've seen in the last number of months.
We've done, and I'm sure y'all have probably done the same thing on your Flipgrids, but like on those focus videos, especially early on when I was trying to teach the kids how their videos should look, like on the focus video in Flipgrid, I would perform the Flipgrid for them. And like in the video, I would say, you need to make sure that you're sitting far enough apart. Do you see how you can see my feet? When you set up your camera, you need to make sure that you're sitting far enough away that I can see your posture and your feet. Do you see the angle that I'm sitting? Make sure you're not looking at if you're looking at your computer, I know that you're not in the same posture that I am. Turn your body to the side. So there was a lot of having to demonstrate and talk the kids through it, even on the Flipgrid stuff.
Will either of you try to do something for Christmas, even if it's like a get together on Zoom? Is there any sort of meeting with the kids or anything like that? Have you anything planned?
Well, today's the first day of Hanukkah, and I teach at a Jewish school, so I'll go with that.
Let's go with Hanukkah.
So, no, not really. I was gonna do when we were still playing. I was gonna do kind of like I don't know, what do you call it, where you string the videos one after another, like they do solos. You put it one after another. There's a term for that I can't think of. I wasn't gonna try to do a virtual band or anything like that. But that was gonna be our Hanukkah concert. Now I'm just gonna have them do their projects and have them share them with their parents, and that's it.
And what about you, Darcy?
We've our 7th and 8th graders, mostly my band. We have 3 bands at my school. My band has been meeting. I say my band. A percentage of my band has been meeting after school on Wednesdays outside on the porch that we call it. It's an outdoor basketball court, and we sit out there and socially distance and all that kind of good stuff. I have about half-ish of my band whose families are willing to send them to that. So we've been meeting on Wednesdays for probably 6 weeks now. And for the first 4 weeks, we worked on one of those flex pieces that a lot of the publishers put out. And then for the last 2 weeks, we spent some time just throwing together some really easy holiday music so that we could send those to the elementaries, because usually my band goes and travels to all of our different elementary schools and, puts on a little holiday show, but obviously that didn't happen this year. So we, out on the porch yesterday, recorded 4 or 5 little Christmas songs that I'm going to throw together in a YouTube video, and then I'll send that to the elementary schools later this evening. But just something so that the elementary kids still know that we're here and that they should still sign up for my class. Right. And it gave my band the opportunity to come in Santa hats and, put lights all around them and their instruments and ornaments and snowflakes and all that kind of good stuff. So it was a little silliness for us to do, but I mean, other than the small group of kids that are coming to us every day at school, there's not a whole lot of togetherness happening. And we thought that we might do one of those virtual bands, but by the time we decided to do it, everybody that would do it had already been booked. And so, I mean, we contacted even so many college kids, and they're like, we were contacted by band directors back in August. And we were like,
well, I got a great idea from a post by Brian Balmages last week. Now, I have no idea whether this will work. I really don't. And I'm glad that I don't actually have to be in each individual room to listen to it either. But the idea is that I will get all of the kids on Zoom with their parents in the background. They'll take out Festa Finale, one of Brian's pieces, and I will play the piece on Zoom with my audio. I will mute all of them. But they will play along with it. So at home, they're playing along with a professional recording of Festa Finale, but they're seeing each other playing Festa Finale. And, it's just to remind ourselves what this is meant to be, maybe. I think it's a great idea. I love the idea, but I have no idea how it's going to work. So we're going to try that after our Christmas quiz next week. So that's our plan. But it's, I heard both of you talking a little bit about, and before I move on to the next topic, I've heard both of you talking about retention being your probably one of your biggest issues. Yeah. Do you feel that retention is how do you feel at this point? We're 9-10 months into this at this point. I was very, very worried about it until the summer, and then seeing the amount of kids that were actually, because we had a temporary oasis of being able to come back and do some summer stuff with them, and we had retained everyone, and it was fantastic. Are you still worried about retention? Are you still working on retention?
Yeah, Mark? I teach at a very, very small school, so my numbers are already small, so my margin for error is pretty tiny, and I lost maybe a third to half of my kids this year.
Wow.
I did get some back. I did get some that came back after missing the beginning, and then I had one or two who left after the beginning. I think a lot of it's fear, and a lot of it comes from home. And I get it. It's okay. It's like I do with any kid who wants to leave band. I just wish them well and tell them they're always welcome back. And we'll see what happens.
We definitely started the year. We're a pretty big band program. We typically have 200-ish beginners. And we were down 50 kids from the very get-go of parents that didn't understand how band could happen online, and so they didn't even give it a chance. So we lost quite a few at the beginning. Most of our like 7th and 8th grade kids made it to us, but the retention problem that we're concerned about with them is this is in such a non-fun performance setting. Like we're concerned that we're going to have like 7th graders that find this structure monotonous, since there's never like a real payoff of having like, a big performance and them not knowing what that feels like. I mean, because you have so many kids, like by the time you get to your first concert, they're like, oh my gosh, this is cool. This part is cool. And never having that payoff. We are concerned that we're going to have 7th graders choose to leave our program going into their 8th grade year. Which is why we're trying to keep it as fun and lighthearted and silly as we can.
And St. Patrick's Day is a big opportunity for our bands at that age, and we had done all of that practice to get ready for St. Patrick's Day and have that big payoff. And we had our new jackets, and not only did we not get that this year, but we're not going to get it next year most likely now as well. And so exactly the same situation, Darcy, of these kids that have been with me now for about 18 months, and 10 of those have been no payoff, no concerts, no Christmas concert this year. Well, apart from our Zoom one, we'll see how that goes. So it's a worry. I think the retention up until summer I was surprised with, but I do worry the longer that we go through this, it's going to be a bigger issue, I mean, what I'd like to know what highlights that you've had this year, though. I mean, is there anything that stands out to you that really worked, or was there just a moment in 2020 from a teaching perspective that you'll remember for the rest of your career? Darcy, do you want to go first on that one, maybe?
Sure. Well, there have definitely been a couple of things that I have learned and will take from this. One of the things that I have really enjoyed is freedom from expectations. Usually at the beginning of the year, I have all of these performances that just line up starting at the end of September and just push on through the entire semester. And so the entire fall semester is preparing for this thing and then preparing for the next week's thing and preparing for the next week's thing. And since all of those were gone, it was just like, hey, let's just teach music. Let's just teach some songs. Let's just teach some new skills. And having no performance expectations was a little bit freeing. Would I want that on a normal year? No, but it did take a lot of stress off of us that we usually put on ourselves very early on in the year. I mean, at least in Texas, the fall semester is very stressful. So this has kind of been a nice wake-up call about how band can feel. And the other thing that has been really nice is region and district band preparation, which I was very opposed to early on in the year. Like we can't do sectionals. I can't have these kids come up and do extra rehearsals with me. Like all of the strategies to prepare these kids were taken away from me. And our district voted that they still wanted to do it. And I asked the kids, how many of you want to do this? And to be kind of honest, I kind of downplayed it. Like I was like, there's not going to be any concert. There's not going to be any clinic. No one's going to see your name on a piece of paper. There's no point in doing this unless you just like being good. How many of you want to do it? And the overwhelming majority of my band did. And I was like, well, that's really great. Guess what? You're basically on your own to work on this. And they did. And were very successful. And what that told me is that I have not trusted my kids nearly as much as I can. I do try to micromanage a lot of stuff. I'm sure that those of you that listen to my podcast are a little surprised that I'm a little type A about this kind of stuff. But I've really found that if I teach the kids well in 6th grade, when they get to be 7th graders, I really can trust them. I can trust them to do the things, and I don't have to find so many opportunities for me to do it for them. And that has been a very liberating realization, that I can give it to the kids because I've prepared them for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about you, Mark?
Well, I think what Darcy says, there's a lot of truth in that. And I was thinking about the payoff you mentioned earlier and how that's missing and other ways that we can give them a payoff. And so when we started the year and a couple things happened that were really great. One is that, I started with the 5th graders, and I had a couple students who normally drop between 4th grade and 5th grade, and 2 or 3 of them, and one in particular with special needs, was going to drop band. He played trumpet in 4th grade, really struggled with it, for sure, and couldn't make things work. But he decided to do bucket drumming because I gave that as an option for the 5th graders, and now he wants to be a percussionist. He loved it, and his timing is impeccable. He counts everything perfectly as a 5th grader. So, that was just a joy to pivot to something else and then discover something for these kids that they can find joy in music rather than sort of that frustration that he had. And then, when I was doing bucket drumming with my younger kids, I had a student who was really struggling with his, to keep himself under control. He was just the unstructured aspect of it wasn't working for him. He's just kind of not a very focused kid, and that's okay. That was me as a child. And so when we pivoted to computer music, he's so engrossed. He loves this. He's making the best little songs, and he's always the one who's asking me the most questions. So he went from being the least involved, the least focused, to being the most focused.
Wow.
Because I found something in music that really speaks to him. And that to me that's the best thing as a teacher, when you can do something to get kids excited that you may have lost otherwise. And it teaches me something about being a teacher too.
For me, it's definitely been community music. Our bands are community bands anyway, and all of our instrumental education happens in community organizations, bands, orchestras, and I was asked to take over the youth element of the band here locally 2 years ago, and the band is long established. It's 142 years old this year, but they had no youth element for years, and we started new, and we recruited really well for it. Very proud of that. And there's a whole new system in place, very much looking at sort of, over to the US. I use Darcy's books to help me teach. I use Sound Innovations, which is why we've been able to share some exercises this year, Mark. Mm-hmm. And then we have the older band who, have their certain level of experience and whatever level of instruction had been given to them quite a few years ago for some, and that has been a weird mix, to have this very structured mix and this very, very community music mix then as well. And last weekend, after our second lockdown lifted, we went out socially distanced with reduced numbers and played at an old folks home outside in the car park, and it was one of the roughest performances and one of the best performances of my life. That's the first time I'd actually been part of live music because even when we met in the summer, we were doing TikTok videos with the kids. We weren't actually doing any playing, and just to hear this music was amazing, and it was so much variation in tuning, and it was just just a stunning sort of sound. And I don't know whether I'll ever take that for granted again. Just to have people wanting to come along and stand in the cold and play some Christmas carols together for their community, I'm not sure I'll ever take that for granted again. So that's definitely been a very recent one, but definitely a highlight of 2020 for me. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that we finished that part of the topic on sort of a higher note for all of us. But I do want to talk a little bit about what we're missing next week. I went to Midwest for the first time 5 years ago, and I'd been told that it was this great event and that I'd have a great time. And then I walked into the room. It was like my career in a room. I was just like, it was just like Walt Disney World for someone like me. I'd never thought that anything like that existed. And I've been there every year since, and I'm just incredibly lucky that I just work for various different companies and people that I get the opportunity to be there, because it's not a short flight for me to get over there. It's not happening next week, and I haven't really thought about that up until recently. You know, it's 2020. You know, everything's cancelled, but I've really started feeling it this week. How often have you been to Midwest, Mark, and sort of what does it mean to you as a band director to go there?
Well, when I first went to Midwest, I wasn't a band director. I was a college music theory professor, and I had started to write band music. Because as a composer, I'd always told myself that one day I'm going to go back and write band music. And so when I started to do it, I went to Midwest. I had a first piece published, and I was there because of that. And I've never missed it since. And now Barnhouse and RWS pay for me to go up there every year. And it's to be part of the community. And we talk about community a lot. You know, and we talk about it a lot on my show, is that the idea of band is it's your safe space. These are the people who are your tribe, your people.
Yes.
And it was that way in junior high school and high school and college. And Midwest every year is like seeing the tribe again and being back in that. And that's, to me, what's most important is walking around that hall, saying hello, sharing jokes, all those things that happen at Midwest and be able to talk to people. It's just, it's an extraordinary and a stunning thing every year. And every year I go home refreshed and recharged and rejuvenated, and I'm going to miss it a lot this year. I miss it a lot.
Mm-hmm. And Darcy, you had a special connection with Midwest this year in particular, because as you mentioned earlier on, your band was meant to play there this year.
Yeah, my first time at Midwest was 2015, and my band played at Midwest in 2015, and it was amazing. I mean, just taking the kids there and doing Midwest with the kids and seeing how excited the kids were, and how many people would come to see a middle school concert was amazing. And, you know, taking them around the city, because Chicago in and of itself is a character in Midwest. And it was just absolutely incredible. I came back the next year in 2016 to present our clinic, Teaching Rhythm Logically. And at that point in time, you know, our podcast had taken off. And so Midwest is a really interesting time for me to get to go meet these people that have been listening to the podcast and sending messages and sending emails. And it's really created this cross-country connection with other music educators that I don't ever know how much I thrive on that until I get back into that. And like when I went up to Midwest last year and, you know, sat at the Kaleidoscope booth, like all of these band directors that were coming just to say hi and to, you know, tell stories and ask questions. Like I thrive on that kind of stuff. And I really am going to miss those interactions this year.
It was like a queue for Santa Claus at Midwest, for people queuing to see Darcy last year. But you're right. I mean, you know, we have such an isolating career sometimes. I mean, it's got better through social media. You know, there's band director groups and there's Facebook pages and there's podcasts and that's all great. But ultimately, if you're a band director, you're probably the only one sort of maybe around. Darcy, you're incredibly lucky to have anyone that listens to the podcast. You've got some great fellow band directors working with you there as well. But it's still a small little community. Sure. You know, you're not working in a big organization with hundreds of people that share your common goals and desires. And so you have limited opportunities as a band director to do that. I mean, I say all of this because if you haven't ever had a chance, and I speak to most of my international colleagues on this, if you haven't had the opportunity to go to Midwest, and if you in the past, do try to get to Midwest sometime. I mean, Chicago at Christmas time is just beautiful, and Midwest is just such a fun experience and some great performances, clinics. I very rarely get to any of the clinics because I'm just on the show floor the whole time. It's part of my job, but it's also one of the best places to be. So yeah, and I mean, the reason I bring it up as well is because I do want to bring this back around to our sponsors as well, Kaleidoscope Adventures, because it's not just about the band directors, something like Midwest. And in fact, the impact of 2020 is felt not just in the bands and the students and the directors, but actually the whole industry. I'm working on a podcast documentary at the moment called Bandemic. And we're talking to people like Stanbury Uniforms. We're talking to people in the travel industry like Kaleidoscope Adventures, and people that make instruments, and then we're talking to band directors and students too. Our community is absolutely huge, and I really do think, and I'll be, just to preface this as well, I do work with Kaleidoscope Adventures and I work with a number of travel agents, but Kaleidoscope Adventures have been incredibly supportive of my podcast and have been supportive of your podcast as well. They're full of band directors that really kind of get the whole community. They feel at home. They, sometimes you kind of meet people from the various different industries that support our community, and they kind of seem like outsiders to it. They seem like business people that are taking their time. Kaleidoscope never feel like that. They definitely feel like they're actually part of the community. They feel very at home in that community. I think, Mark, I know you've been sponsored by Kaleidoscope for quite some time now, I think. How did you get around to meeting the guys?
They sent me an email out of the blue. I got an email and they said, we'd like to sponsor your show, send us some numbers, tell us what you're doing. And then it just went from there. And I think they picked up After Sectionals and Everything Band right around the same time, because I remember talking to Darcy about it on private instant messenger. But, Kaleidoscope's been really terrific. I was really concerned in the summer, that, they're a travel company and there's no travel. I was worried about the sponsorship, but, I got a really reassuring phone call. They're standing behind us. And so it's really great that they support the community in the way that they do. And, we need to make sure that we support them back when this is all over, because they've been really terrific, at least to me, and what they do for kids and the travel is amazing. It's an experience that, when I look back on my high school experience, the trips are what I remember.
Right. Yeah. It's true. It's my best sales line as well. But it 100% is true. I spent years in my own youth band, and it's that 2 weeks in the USA in 1998 that I remember. Darcy, yeah. So you were actually at the booth last year doing interviews with at the
Absolutely. It was. I don't know. It's just a ton of fun to see how well, as you were saying, they blend into the community. And part of it is probably because they have former music educators on their staff that understand exactly what you as a band director are concerned about when it comes to traveling with your kids, and make sure that everything is as organized as a band director would expect it to be, and that the kids are as safe as they can be, even if it's in the middle of a pandemic. I know they've gone above and beyond this year to make sure that they are only bringing their clientele to the best and cleanest and safest, and checking all the boxes, crossing all the T's, all that kind of good stuff. And they've just been very supportive of us doing our creative thing the way that we would do it, and putting their stamp of approval on it. And I really appreciate that.
Well, beyond just being a sponsor of my podcast, I actually work directly with them as well. So I work with Celtic Horizon Tours here in UK and Ireland, and work Kaleidoscope in the US. And so I get a bit of the inside baseball here as well, right? And I actually get to be part of these staff meetings. And when I started working with them a couple of months ago, there was just ideas after ideas in the middle of this pandemic, where travel companies and travel is on its knees, and band travel in particular is so difficult. There's nothing but positive ideas and new programs that they're releasing, and new people, new people actually on the team and working with them in such a positive way. And my sincere thank you to the entire team, to Robin and Keith and Debbie and Stephen and Joseph, just everyone that's involved there. They have been just part of some of their conversations has actually lifted my week. And so, I would encourage anyone that is part of our community, not just to support companies like Kaleidoscope Adventures, but the entire industry. If you have traveled with Kaleidoscope or with someone before, take that phone call, answer that email. If you've got your uniforms from someone or instruments from someone, or there's a local supplier that you usually use, talk to them. What industry people want now at the moment is communication, and for the ability to be able to start having conversations again. Because I think for the last 9 months, suppliers have been afraid to kind of have those conversations. Sure. And now even if you're not in a position to actually do anything with the suppliers, I think having the conversation is a great first step, because we're going to miss that next week in particular. So, if you're enjoying these podcasts, if you're enjoying this live stream tonight, that's my one ask today is that you start having those conversations with the people that are working in this industry, that have supported the industry for so long. And I will mention Kaleidoscope towards the end again, but I do want to move on a little bit. We're talking about podcasts and the support we've had from Kaleidoscope. What has podcasting been like for you guys in 2020? I mean, I tell you what it's been like for me. It's been brand new for me. So my answer is pretty short. I'm still trying to figure out how to do it, but I know. I mean, it's been such a different sort of year. It's very hard to not get very negative when we're talking to fellow band directors, and then you realize, oh, my mic's on, I've been recording all of this negative stuff for an hour. Darcy, I mean, your stuff, particularly the last couple of episodes, I've found really, really uplifting, and
well, good.
You found peace with yourself actually lately.
As a Texas band director, we have the ability to go a little overboard with our profession. And so this has given us, all of this has given us a chance to really reevaluate what are necessary components to our career and what is really the most valuable aspect of what we do with the kids. And I don't ever want to lose sight of this moment. I think this has been a really powerful resetting for parts of our community. And we would be remiss to push that aside and just complain all the time. It's very easy to find things to complain about. I mean, nothing is ideal that's happening right now. But I don't think that any of us want to sit and listen to that all the time. And I certainly don't think anybody wants to download an episode of my podcast and listen to me complain about the same thing that they just complained about with their friend. I don't know, like maybe on some level, I mean, like we do still complain on our podcast, plenty. Because there is something, a connection that happens when you know that you're not alone in how crazy everything is. But there's also a lot of good that's come out of this. I mean, how many of us were using Flipgrid a year ago? None of us. I mean, we've kind of reinvented our career. And I think if we can keep our heads above water long enough to see that there's some really positive things that have come out of this, then I would love to be able to share that with our listeners, and, keep us positive enough to get to the point that our career looks somewhat normal again. And then remind our listeners of all of the things that we found before that we need to keep.
Right. Very important.
Yeah. So
I remember what that's like. Yeah.
I definitely think that the content of our podcast has changed quite a bit this year, just because there are very few concrete things that I can talk about. And that's one of the things that I've really liked about our podcast, is that it's been very pedagogy heavy. And talking to people about how you can teach something and why it works when we teach it this way and how we can better that stuff. But none of us are in the same boat. I mean, you have Mark that doesn't even have kids right now. Or you have schools that have completely shut down their fine arts department. You have people that are only allowed to teach asynchronously. You have the schools that don't allow their kids to do the Zoom thing at all. You've got, even in the Valley in Texas, down on the Mexican border, where, half of them don't have internet in their homes. I mean, I really have felt resistant to have the same kind of content, because I don't think it carries as well through our our listeners as it would on a normal year. And so we've tried to make it more of like a roundtable, just discussion about our career in general, our profession in general, and how it affects our personal lives. We've tried to keep it much more on a conversational level than on a teaching level. And I hope our listeners appreciate that. I don't know.
It's actually, and I've said this to you before, and even in messages, it's actually been really interesting to watch your journey during the year. I know we've all been on that journey, but actually following someone else on that same journey actually has been fascinating to watch. And I just, the last couple of episodes have been I've never heard the three of you at such peace. Particularly the last episode. It's like, this is the most chill I have ever heard this podcast.
We have definitely come to terms with so much of what we could be freaking out about doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. I loved, like, Mark at the very beginning of this said something about how, it probably, like, in the grand scheme of things, it'll all come out in the wash. And it's really important for us to remember that. I think we hyperbolize little things. This is a very detail-oriented profession. And we get so hung up on these little things. And ultimately, in 10 years, obviously, this is going to have major impacts to our profession. Obviously, this is going to have major impacts to everything about band. There's going to be a lot of stuff that never goes back to normal. But in the grand scheme of things, if we're loving kids and we're teaching music, it's all going to come out in the wash. And maybe my band doesn't sound as awesome as they should have, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mark, your podcast then is a very different format then.
Right.
I mentioned earlier on, it's these interview formats, and speaking to people, and I've had a couple of interviews recently that I can't use because they got so emotional that it just really ended up just being a conversation with me and the guest. How have you managed that this year? We're all going on our journeys, just like Darcy. And how have you managed to keep these interviews so positive?
Well, it's hard because we're all feeling it, and we always talk about it. The guests and we always have a conversation about what's happening, and so it's present there. But I try to make the interview about them, and I try to remember that what I'm doing is creating a repository for people in the future, and I try to put the podcast into, like, out of time, so that someone listening in 2030 can hear it and say, oh, okay, that was during that pandemic in 2020, but it's still relevant to just the band world. And so it's a little easier for me to kind of keep the coronavirus out of it. Now, I do always ask the question, what's coming up? What do you have in the future? And, it's become almost a running joke now that, pandemic aside, and so that's about the only part of it that's really affected. And so I really try to talk that out. But, some of the guests have been very specific to the pandemic. I had Mark Speed on, and he talked about CBNA and the study that they sponsored. And he actually gave the numbers for how many millions of dollars that costs. And, so there's been some things that have been really specific to the pandemic, but it's really great. The only thing it's affected is me, because I feel more overwhelmed because of the sort of the constant stress and trauma. And I know I'm not really more overwhelmed. It's just in my head, but I'm not being as regular. It's a little harder for me to think ahead and to think, okay, in 3 weeks, I'm going to do this. And in 4 weeks, I'm going to do that. But other than that, it's been fine, and guests have more time than they used to.
Yeah. We all need to talk. We all need to get stuff off our chests at the moment. So tell me a little bit about your plans for 2020. Mark, you were telling me a little bit before before we went live that you're in the process of studying at the moment. And
that's keeping that under wraps a little bit. But
what are your plans for 2021?
Well, I'm hoping that now that we have at least a ray of hope with the vaccinations that are beginning to happen around the world, that by the summer we can begin to actually start looking at having a little return to normalcy. And that's a big fingers crossed and a big if. But I'm hoping that I can start my fourth graders new next year and fifth graders with instruments, and it's going to be different because now I've given them a different experience and a taste of a different kind of music making. So we'll see how that comes out in the wash, but just trying to get back onto it. And I want to, incorporate what I'm doing now into more elective stuff with my middle schoolers and, just try to learn from what's happened and build again. It's been my career. I build things up and build them again and build them again. And here we go.
Yep.
What about you, Darcy? What are your plans for 2021? Anything on the horizon?
We're going to, keep on trucking with the beginners, see where we can get them with our band. Because of the number of kids that actually come in person, having real concerts in the foreseeable future is not a thing. We're hoping that we maybe at the end of May can have an outdoor concert, that maybe more of our families will have had the chance to get vaccinated, or maybe our numbers will be lower at that point. Or maybe they'll feel safer sending their kids even for an outdoor concert. We still have our fingers crossed that we'll be able to do some live performance before school lets out for the year. We'll see. In the meantime, we're doing kind of prepping for that kind of stuff. We've gone through and decided that we're going to do some little mini flex pieces on our own, taking like maybe a piece that we would want to play at a spring concert and going through and breaking it down to the most important parts and teaching it in like trio or quartet form, maybe teaching the first third of a piece and maybe the last chunk so that it kind of fits together. And then if we get the opportunity to come together, then we have a big chunk of the piece already learned. So we're going to start doing that at the beginning of January. And then even on, like, it's so strange to say this out loud, but by the beginning of March, we're supposed to make a decision if we think we can play at Midwest next year.
Oh, okay.
So lots of big decisions to be made there.
So the invitation is rotating?
They did. They rolled
Fantastic.
that invitation to everybody that missed out on playing this year. But, we have to see what our families feel comfortable with. I mean, this is going to have to be a decision that feels right for our program and right for our community, not right for my ego. Right. So going through and deciding, can I make a good band out of what we have? And am I shunning families that I should be supporting because they don't feel comfortable? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I need to make sure that I'm protecting all of the families that are invested in this. So.
And I think we have another big year ahead of us. I think 2021 will still be reinventing a lot. And I mean, I just want to thank both of you for all the work that you do with your podcast, because it's what has kept me going for years. It's inspired me on a week-to-week basis, both of you, and has kept me going this year too. So a big personal thank you to both of you for all your work. For what it's worth, my own work, we're really hoping to get my band back in January or February. We think January might be difficult given that, people are going to be meeting over Christmas and we expect spikes. But we're hoping to get back into some sort of sectional. We have a brand new band room. I say brand new, the building's about 150 years old, but it's about the same age as the band. So, but it's new to us and we've been fixing the roof on it and we're due to move into that very soon. So that's a little bit of good news on the horizon. And then I mentioned earlier on, if anyone's interested in kind of hearing more about this whole pandemic through a band perspective, I have the documentary Bandemic. It's like Serial without the murder and more band. For anyone that's heard the Finding Drumcore podcast, if you're a Drumcore fan, I took over their podcast this year. And it's very much in the style of that, but a little bit broader in its scope. And so that'll be launching in January. And if you like alcohol and band, then I am launching a new podcast next week called Repertoire Happy Hour, where I bring a group of band directors together and we have drinks and plan a fake concert every month. And so next week,
I expect an invitation for that one.
It is an open invitation to both of you for that podcast. So that is launching next week. Oh, look at that. Drumcore International said Finding Drumcore was great. Thank you, Drumcore International. So thank you so much, guys, for being here and for all of your work, not just this year, but in previous years too. Where can people find out more about you, Mark, your work and your podcast?
Mm-hmm. So I have a website, markjconnor.com. Just go there. It has all my professional stuff and my compositions. You can also find my music through the Barnhouse or the RWS Music or Grand Mesa Music. And the podcast is also at that website and also on iTunes and all the places.
Darcy?
You will most likely find me on Facebook. That would probably be the easiest way for you to get a hold of me. We have our After Sectionals page, and we have a couple of different groups that we manage on the After Sectionals page that you'll want to join because we put a lot of our actual pedagogy stuff inside those groups. You can, if you go to aftersectionals.com, you'll find links to both of my books, Teaching Rhythmologically and Pacing for Success. But Facebook is where you're going to find me most of the time. I pretend to have an Instagram account for After Sectionals, and that does not get updated very frequently because I do not have time for this stuff. I have like kids to teach. But Facebook is the best way.
Well, you can find everything I'm doing at globalbandroom.com. There's a few different podcasts and documentaries that you can find there. And you can also find out a little bit about the work that I do here specifically in Ireland with a Facebook page called Bands of Ireland. And we do weekly interviews with local people, and we find out about which bands in Ireland have the best tea breaks and what they're all up to on a weekly basis too. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit about the Irish perspective on bands, you can head over to Bands of Ireland and Global Bandroom. We look at bands from around the world too. So Darcy, Mark, thank you so much. I'll miss not seeing you next week at Midwest, but have a happy Christmas and happy holidays, and hopefully we see you all again in 2021.
Yes.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.